Hey guys, tonight we're stepping inside a place you think you know from fantasy novels and tavern scenes in movies. The Medieval Inn, that cosy, romantic establishment where travellers share tales by the fire, bards strum lutes, and everyone's having a jolly good time over foaming mugs of ale. Yeah, no. The reality of a medieval inn was less Fellowship of the Ring and more survival horror with bedbugs. These places were loud, dangerous, crawling with vermin, and run by people who'd seen too much to care about your comfort. So, before you romanticize wooden beams and candlelight, let me walk you through an actual day inside one of these establishments. And trust me, you wouldn't last past breakfast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's set the scene. It's 1348, somewhere in England. You're standing outside the Green Dragon, a two-storey timber-framed building that leans slightly to the left, like it's been drinking its own inventory. The sign outside depicts what might be a dragon, or possibly a diseased lizard. No one's quite sure anymore, and the paint is peeling so badly, it doesn't matter. The building itself is constructed from timber and wattle and daub, those lovely mud and stick walls that are great at keeping in heat, smoke, and the collective odour of unwashed humanity. The thatched roof looks picturesque from a distance, but up close you can see it's home to an entire ecosystem of birds, rats and insects that have established a thriving civilization up there. You push open the heavy wooden door, which scrapes against the packed dirt floor with a sound like someone dragging a corpse. Immediately, you're hit by the smell. It's not one smell, mind you. It's a layered assault on your senses. Stale beer, wood smoke, wet wool, sweat, the privy around back that's overflowing again, and something cooking that might be food or might be boiled leather. Hard to tell. The main room is larger than you'd expect, about 30 feet by 20, with a low ceiling supported by blackened beams. A massive stone fireplace dominates one wall, currently belching smoke into the room because medieval chimneys are more suggestion than function. The floor is packed earth mixed with rushes, straw, and whatever people have dropped, spilled, or left behind over the past few months. Walk carefully. You don't want to know what that crunching sound is. Rough-hewn tables and benches fill the space, all carved with years of bored travellers' initials, crude drawings, and what might be medieval graffiti, or possibly just knife marks from fights. The lighting comes from tallow candles that smell like burning fat, because that's exactly what they are, and a few oil lamps that produce more smoke than light. Welcome to the Medieval Inn. You're home for the night, assuming you survive it. The inn doesn't wake up gently. There's no soft sunrise streaming through windows, because there are no windows, just wooden shutters that are closed against the cold. Around 4:30 in the morning, the innkeeper's wife, a woman named Margery who looks 60 but is probably 35, starts banging pots in the kitchen with the subtlety of a church bell. This is your alarm clock. There's no snooze button. The inn operates on a schedule dictated by daylight, manual labour, and the very real fear of wasting expensive candles. So when Margery starts her day, everyone starts their day, whether they like it or not. And trust me, nobody likes it. The first sounds you hear are coughing. So much coughing. Everyone in the medieval period has some kind of respiratory issue from years of inhaling. Smoke, dust, and general air quality that would make a modern EPA inspector weep. The main room fills with the sound of people hacking up things that probably shouldn't be coming out of human lungs. Then comes the scratching, because everyone, and I mean everyone, has lice, fleas, or both. Guests wake up and immediately start the morning ritual of scratching various body parts while trying to maintain some dignity. They fail. Dignity isn't really a thing when you're picking bugs out of your hair before breakfast. The overnight guests begin to stir from their sleeping arrangements. If you paid extra, you might have gotten a spot in one of the upstairs rooms, sharing a straw mattress with 3 strangers. If you were cheap or poor, you slept on the floor down here in the main room, using your pack as a pillow and hoping nobody robbed you while you slept. Spoiler alert, someone probably tried. William the innkeeper descends from the private family quarters above. He's a stocky man, with a face like a punched loaf of bread and hands that could strangle a bear. You need that kind of presence when you're running a medieval inn, because trouble is a regular guest and it doesn't pay its tab. His first job is to check if anyone died during the night. This isn't paranoia, it's procedure. Between illness, violence, and the general fragility of medieval life, finding a corpse in the morning is common enough that innkeepers have a routine for it. Today, everyone's breathing. That's a good start. William walks through the room, kicking the feet of anyone still sleeping. Up with you, this ain't a monastery. His voice sounds like gravel being crushed. The few remaining sleepers groan and rise because arguing with William is like arguing with a wall, except the wall might actually listen. The fire, which has been burning low all night, because someone needed to tend it, gets built back up. A young boy, probably the innkeeper's son or an apprentice, feeds it logs while trying not to get smoke in his eyes. He fails. His eyes are streaming, but he keeps working because crying about smoke is like crying about rain, pointless and constant. As the fire grows, so does the temperature in the room. But don't get too comfortable. Medieval buildings are great at being freezing cold or unbearably hot, with no middle ground. The fire creates a sphere of warmth about 6 feet in diameter, and everywhere else is still cold enough to see your breath. Margery emerges from the kitchen area, which is really just a partitioned corner with a smaller hearth. She's carrying a large iron pot that probably weighs as much as a small child, and sets it over the fire. Inside is the inn's breakfast offering, a watery porridge made from whatever grain was cheapest this week. The smell of cooking porridge fills the room, mixing with all the other smells in a way that doesn't improve anything. But it's food, and after a night of sleeping on the floor with strangers, even grey, slop starts looking good. This is how every day begins at the medieval inn, not with a rooster's crow or gentle morning light, but with coughing, scratching, and the promise of porridge that tastes like sadness. And the day is just getting started. Breakfast at a medieval inn is less about nutrition and more about not starving before lunch. The spread, if you can call it that, consists of whatever Margery pulled together from yesterday's leftovers and this morning's desperation. The star of the show is pottage, that thick grain porridge that's been simmering since yesterday. It's made from barley or oats, water and hope. If you're lucky, there might be some onions or beans thrown in. If you're unlucky, which is most days, it's just grey glop that has the consistency of paste and roughly the same flavour. Everyone lines up with their own wooden bowls if they brought one, or waits to use one of the inn's communal bowls that haven't been properly washed since last spring. The bowl selection is important because some of them have cracks that leak, and nobody wants porridge running through their fingers while they eat. Margery ladles the pottage with the enthusiasm of someone who's done this exact motion 10,000 times. Splat. Into your bowl. Next person. Splat. There's no, would you like some more? Or, how's that portion size? You get what you get, and you're grateful because the alternative is nothing. Alongside the pottage is bread. Now, this isn't your artisan sourdough or fresh-baked baguette. This is hard, dark rye bread that was baked 3 days ago and has been hardening ever since. The crust could be used as a weapon. The inside is dense and sour. Some loaves have creative additions like ground peas, acorns, or sawdust to bulk up the flour and make it stretch further. You don't slice this bread. You attack it. Some people use knives. Others just bash it against the table until it breaks into manageable chunks. The sound echoes through the room like someone chopping wood, which honestly isn't far off. For drink, there's ale. Weak ale, but ale nonetheless. This is what everyone drinks because the water is essentially a disease delivery system. The local well is downstream from everything you don't want to be downstream from, including the privy, the tanner's workshop, and someone's pig pen. So, ale it is, even at 6 in the morning. The ale is served from a large barrel in the corner, drawn into wooden cups or leather jacks. It's brown, slightly cloudy, and tastes like bread that's been left in water too long, which is basically what it is. The alcohol content is low enough that you won't get drunk, but high enough to kill most of the things that would kill you in the water. Children drink this too. Yes, children. There's no juice boxes or milk that hasn't already started turning. So everyone from age 5 to 85 starts their day with weak beer and questionable porridge. The guests eat, standing, sitting on benches or squatting near the fire, depending on their status and how early they woke up. The best spots near the warmth go to whoever got there first, or whoever looks dangerous enough that no one wants to argue with them. Conversation is minimal. People are tired, hungry, and generally suspicious of each other. This is a room full of strangers who shared space overnight, and in medieval times, strangers are potential threats until proven otherwise. So everyone eats in relative silence, broken only by slurping, chewing sounds that suggest some people are fighting their bread, and the occasional cough. If you're a merchant staying at the inn, you might have brought your own food, some cheese or dried meat that you pull from your pack. This immediately marks you as wealthy, and every eye in the room tracks your movements. Not because they're going to rob you necessarily, but because they're calculating whether they could rob you if the opportunity arose. The innkeeper and his wife don't eat with the guests. They're too busy managing the chaos. William is already dealing with a dispute about someone's missing boot. Margery is rationing the porridge to make sure it lasts through everyone currently in line while eyeing the pot and doing mental math about lunch. Breakfast lasts maybe 20 minutes. Then people start moving, because staying at an inn costs money, and every moment you're not travelling or conducting business is a moment wasted. Merchants pack their goods. Pilgrims gather their meagre belongings. Labourers head out to whatever work awaits them. The room empties gradually, leaving behind dirty bowls, crumbs of dark bread, and the lingering smell of too many people in too small a space. Margery and her helpers begin the task of cleaning up, which involves sweeping debris into corners and trying to decide if any of the bowls are worth washing, or if they should just rinse them and call it good. This is breakfast at a medieval inn. It doesn't nourish so much as prevent immediate starvation, but in 1348, that's enough. With breakfast concluded, and most overnight guests departed, the real work of running the inn begins. And by work, I mean the kind of relentless physical labour that would make modern hospitality workers quit on the spot. Margery's first priority is the sleeping quarters upstairs. These rooms, if you can call them that, are small chambers with straw mattresses on wooden frames. Each room typically sleeps 4 to 6 people. Strangers sharing a bed because private rooms are a luxury that won't exist for common travellers for another few centuries. She climbs the narrow wooden stairs, which creak ominously under her weight. The stairs are steep, uneven, and probably a safety violation in any modern building code. But this is medieval England, where safety is something that happens to other people. The first room she enters smells like a combination of sweat, stale breath, and something died in the walls. This is normal. The windows, really just holes with wooden shutters, have been closed all night to keep out the cold, which means no fresh air has entered this space for approximately 10 hours. Margery throws open the shutters, letting in the morning light and a blast of cold air. The straw mattresses need to be checked for vermin, flipped and beaten to redistribute the straw. This is done by literally hitting them with a stick while clouds of dust, straw particles and probably lice eggs fill the air. The linens, which is a generous term for the rough cloth sheets, are pulled off and inspected. Are they visibly soiled? Then they get washed. Are they just normally dirty? They get folded and go back on the bed. Water is expensive to heat, and soap is even more expensive, so washing happens only when absolutely necessary. What qualifies as absolutely necessary? You don't want to know. Meanwhile, downstairs, William is dealing with deliveries. Running a medieval inn means managing a constant stream of supplies. Ale arrives in barrels from the local brewery. Bread comes from the baker down the street, delivered by a boy who's always got flour in his hair. Occasionally, a farmer drops off vegetables, eggs, or a chicken that's past its prime but still technically edible. Each delivery requires inspection because everyone in medieval commerce is trying to cheat everyone else. The baker might send loaves that are underweight. The brewer might water down the ale. The farmer might try to pass off vegetables that are more rot than vegetable. William checks everything with the suspicious eye of a man who's been scammed before. The stable behind the inn also needs attention. Yes, medieval inns have stables, because travellers arrive on horses or with pack animals. A young stable hand, probably about 14 and already looking 30, is responsible for feeding, watering and mucking out the stalls. Mucking out stalls is exactly what it sounds like. Shoveling horse manure and dirty straw into a pile that will later be sold to farmers as fertiliser. It's heavy, smelly work that has to be done daily, and the stable hand does it while breathing through his mouth and dreaming of literally any other job. The horses themselves are valuable, which means they're potential targets for thieves. The stable is locked at night, and the stable hand actually sleeps out there to guard the animals. His bed is a pile of hay in the corner, and his blanket is a horse blanket. It's not glamorous, but it's employment. Back in the main room, the young apprentice boy is sweeping the floor. This involves using a rough broom to push the accumulated debris, the rushes, old straw, spilled food, and things we won't identify, toward the door and out into the street. The floor itself is hard-packed dirt that's been compressed by years of foot traffic into something resembling concrete. The tables and benches get wiped down with a damp rag that hasn't been cleaned in recent memory. The goal isn't sanitation, it's removing the chunks. Sticky spots remain sticky, stains are permanent, but hey, at least you can see the wood grain. The fire needs constant attention. Someone has to feed it logs, adjust the positioning for cooking, and make sure it doesn't get too hot or too cold. Fire management is actually a skilled job, because an unattended fire can burn down the entire inn, which has happened to approximately every third inn in England at some point. Margery also has to prepare for the midday meal, which means more cooking. She's already planning what to make based on what's available and what won't poison anyone. Her kitchen is a corner with a cooking hearth, some iron pots, a few wooden bowls, knives that need sharpening, and shelves holding clay jars of salt, herbs, and things that might be spices or might be very old herbs. Everything in the inn operates on a tight schedule, because daylight is the only free resource. Candles cost money, oil for lamps costs money, so work that requires vision happens during daylight hours, and everyone moves with purpose because wasting time means wasting light. This morning routine, cleaning, preparing, managing, happens every single day. There are no days off, no weekends, no vacation time. The inn is a living entity that demands constant feeding, and the people running it are the food. By mid-morning, the inn is ready for whatever the day brings, and in medieval England, that could be anything from peaceful travellers to armed robbery, usually both. Around mid-morning, the inn's character starts to shift. The overnight guests are gone, but a new crowd begins to filter in. These aren't travellers looking for beds. These are locals looking for ale, gossip, and a break from their own miserable jobs. The day drinkers arrive first. There's Thomas the carpenter, who's already had a bad morning because medieval construction is a nightmare of splinters and smashed fingers. There's Agnes, a woman who sells eggs in the market and has been on her feet since dawn. And there's a rotating cast of labourers, craftsmen, and people who technically have jobs, but are remarkably good at avoiding them. They don't come to the inn for the ambiance. They come because it's one of the few public spaces where you can sit, drink, and temporarily forget that life is a brutal slog toward an early grave. Also, the inn is warmer than most homes, and heat costs money. William starts serving ale almost immediately. The drinks are measured in pints, served in wooden or leather vessels, and payment is expected up front. No tabs, no credit. This is a cash business, and William's trust extends exactly as far as he can see you. The price varies based on quality. The cheapest ale, the stuff that tastes like someone strained it through a boot, costs a farthing per pint. Better ale, which still isn't good, but at least doesn't taste actively hostile, costs a halfpenny. On special occasions there might be wine, but that's for wealthy merchants and nobles who wander in, not for the regular crowd. Conversation starts slowly. Medieval small talk revolves around a few key topics. The weather, because it directly impacts food production and therefore survival. Local gossip, because everyone knows everyone's business. And complaints about whoever is in charge, whether that's the local lord, the king, or God himself. Today's hot gossip involves the baker's daughter, who was seen talking to the blacksmith's apprentice behind the church. This is scandalous enough to generate at least an hour of speculation about their intentions, morals, and probable future. Medieval people had limited entertainment, so they really committed to gossip. Someone mentions that the harvest looks poor this year. This leads to worried murmurs because a poor harvest means high grain prices, which means expensive bread, which means people starve. This topic kills the mood pretty effectively, so someone changes the subject to the time Gerald fell off a roof last month and landed in a pig pen. The room fills with the sound of conversation, laughter, and the occasional argument that gets loud enough for William to look up from his work with an expression that says, "Don't make me come over there." Most arguments diffuse before reaching violence, but not always. William keeps a heavy wooden club behind the bar for special occasions. Around noon, the lunch crowd starts arriving. These are travellers who timed their journey to stop at the inn for the midday meal, local workers grabbing food during a break, and merchants conducting business over plates of whatever Margery has cooked. Medieval inns serve as unofficial business centres. Deals are made, contracts are discussed, and agreements are reached over shared food and ale. There's no conference room or office space, just tables, benches, and the understanding that business happens wherever people gather. The food for lunch is more substantial than breakfast, but that's a low bar. Margery serves pottage again, but this time it's been upgraded with some vegetables and maybe some meat if a good deal was struck with a supplier. The meat is usually mutton, pork, or chicken that's seen better days, but is still technically consumable. There's also pie. Medieval meat pies are a staple of inn food because they're portable, filling, and you can hide questionable ingredients inside pastry. The crust is thick and serves as much as a container as food. Sometimes people eat it. Sometimes they just eat the filling and leave the crust, which gets fed to the pigs or the poor, whoever arrives first. Fish appears on Fridays because the church mandates no meat on Fridays, and the church's rules are not suggestions. The fish is usually dried, salted or smoked because fresh fish is a luxury that spoils quickly. It's cooked into stews or served with bread, and it tastes like salt with a hint of something that was once swimming. Prices for meals vary. A simple bowl of pottage might cost a penny, Add bread and you're up to 2 pence. A full meal with meat, bread and ale could run 4 to 6 pence, which is a significant expense for a labourer who makes maybe 8 pence a day, if he's lucky. The room during lunch is chaotic. Conversations overlap, creating a wall of noise. The fire crackles, dishes clank. Someone's always laughing while someone else is arguing. The smell of food, smoke, and humanity creates a thick atmosphere that you could practically see if the lighting were better. This is the inn at its busiest, most alive moment. It's crowded, loud, and probably violating several modern health codes. But it's also the beating heart of the community, where news spreads, deals are made, and people briefly connect before returning to their separate struggles. And Margery is running back and forth between the kitchen and the main room, serving food, collecting coins, and wondering how she ended up here. Welcome to lunchtime at the medieval inn, where the food is questionable and the company is worse, but at least it's warm. After the lunch rush subsides, a different crowd begins to filter into the inn. These are the merchants, the travellers who've been on the road for days or weeks, and they come bearing two things: money and stories. Merchants in the medieval period are essentially travelling salesmen with pack horses. They move goods between towns and cities, buying low in one market and selling high in another. Their lives are spent on dangerous roads, sleeping in questionable inns, and trying not to get robbed by bandits who have a better understanding of the local geography. When a merchant arrives at the inn, everyone notices. They're identifiable by their better clothing, the pack animals outside, and the wary expression of someone who's been scammed in at least 3 different languages. They carry their wealth with them, usually in the form of goods or coin, which makes them targets. William greets merchants with respect bordering on friendliness, because these customers pay well and might become regulars on this route. He offers them the best seats, the cleaner cups, and actual attention to their requests. Meanwhile, the local day drinkers watch from their corners, calculating the merchant's wealth and wondering if he's travelling alone. Merchants don't just bring goods, they bring information, news. Travel slowly in medieval England, limited by the speed of horses and the willingness of people to share what they know. So when a merchant arrives from London or York or anywhere that isn't here, people want to hear what's happening in the wider world. Today's merchant is a wool trader named Richard, travelling from the north with several bales of raw wool destined for the cloth markets. He's tired, saddle-sore, and willing to talk in exchange for ale and an audience. The conversation starts with pleasantries. How was the road? See any trouble? Is the bridge at Ashford still out? Then it moves to news. Richard mentions that wool prices are up in London, which is good for producers, but bad for everyone else. He talks about a fire that destroyed 3 buildings in York. He casually mentions that the king's taxes are going up again, which generates groans from everyone in earshot. Someone asks if he's heard anything about the plague. There are always rumours about plague because it's 1348 and the Black Death is about to fundamentally change European civilization, though nobody knows that yet. Richard hasn't heard anything specific, just vague stories from the continent about people dying in unusual numbers. Everyone goes quiet for a moment, because plague is the thing nobody wants to think about but everyone fears. Then someone changes the subject to lighter topics like banditry. Richard describes an attempted robbery 2 days ago. He was travelling with another merchant, and they were approached by 3 men with weapons demanding their goods. The merchants, who weren't born yesterday, had hired 2 guards specifically for this possibility. There was a brief standoff, some shouting, and the bandits decided that 3 against 4 weren't odds they liked. This story is received with nods of understanding. Banditry is just another cost of doing business, like taxes or bad weather. You plan for it, prepare for it, and hope your preparations are enough. The conversation shifts to trade routes and market conditions. Which towns are buying what, where the competition is fierce, who's paying fair prices and who's running scams. This information is valuable, and merchants guard it carefully, but Richard shares enough to seem helpful without giving away his competitive advantages. Local craftsmen in the inn perk up at mentions of market demand. If wool is valuable, maybe the weaver can negotiate better terms. If leather goods are selling well in the next town over, perhaps the cobbler should consider a visit. The inn becomes an informal exchange of economic intelligence. Margery serves Richard a proper meal, not just pottage, but actual roasted meat, bread that's only 1 day old, and cheese that hasn't developed a suspicious coating. This is the premium service reserved for paying customers who can afford it. Richard eats while continuing to talk, because merchants are professional multitaskers. Between bites, he mentions other inns along his route. Which ones are clean, which ones are run by thieves, which ones have decent stables. This information is gold for other travellers, and everyone listens carefully. A good inn can make a journey bearable. A bad inn can get you robbed, sick, or worse. William asks about the roads ahead, his tone casual but his interest genuine. He's gathering information too, because knowing which routes are safe and which are crawling with bandits helps him advise his own customers. A helpful innkeeper gets repeat business and good word-of-mouth recommendations. As the afternoon wears on, more travellers arrive. A pilgrim heading to a shrine, travelling in a group for safety. A messenger carrying letters for a nobleman, exhausted from hard riding. A couple of labourers looking for work in the next town, hoping their skills will be needed there. Each brings their own story, their own news, their own perspective on the world beyond this village. The inn becomes a crossroads of information, where the outside world filters in through tired travellers and road-weary merchants. And through it all, Margery and William work, serving ale, cooking food, settling disputes, and managing the delicate ecosystem of their establishment. Because the medieval inn isn't just a business, it's a hub, a meeting place, a source of news and gossip and connection in a world where most people never travel more than 10 miles from where they were born. This is the afternoon at the inn, where the wider world comes to rest for a moment before moving on. As afternoon fades toward evening, the inn undergoes another transformation. The travellers who need to reach their destinations before dark start packing up and leaving. The locals who spent the afternoon drinking either go home or settle in for a longer session, and a new element enters the mix: entertainment. Medieval inns are one of the few public venues for entertainment, and people are desperate for distraction from their lives of relentless labour and uncertainty. On a good night, you might get a travelling performer. On a bad night, entertainment is watching two drunk farmers argue about property boundaries. Tonight is somewhere in the middle. A minstrel arrives just as the sun is getting low. He's a thin man with a lute slung across his back, and the confident air of someone who's talked his way out of countless tight situations. His clothes are patched but colourful, suggesting he was once prosperous, or at least good at creating that illusion. William eyes him with the suspicion innkeepers reserve for performers, priests, and anyone who doesn't have visible means of paying their tab. "You playing or paying?" he asks. "Playing for my supper and a place by the fire," the minstrel responds smoothly, "and I guarantee your customers will drink more with music than without." This is probably true. William nods, and the minstrel sets up in a corner where he can be heard but won't block traffic. He tunes his lute, a process that sounds like strangling a cat, but eventually produces something resembling music. The first song is a ballad about a knight and his lady. It's romantic, formulaic, and exactly what audiences expect. The minstrel has a decent voice, and the story is familiar enough that some people hum along. It's pleasant background noise that improves the atmosphere without demanding too much attention. Between songs, the minstrel tells jokes. Medieval humour is crude, relies heavily on bodily functions, and punches down at whoever is convenient. a joke about a peasant trying to impress a lady, a joke about a priest and a tavern girl, a joke about the French because apparently making fun of the French is timeless. The crowd's reaction is mixed. Some people laugh, some people groan. One old man in the corner has been asleep since before the minstrel arrived, and continues sleeping through everything. The minstrel doesn't seem bothered. He's performed in worse rooms for worse crowds. As the evening progresses, the ale flows more freely. People drink to relax, to forget, to build courage for conversations they wouldn't have sober. The noise level increases. Conversations get louder. Laughter gets more frequent and less genuine. William watches his crowd carefully. He's seen this progression countless times. Ale makes people friendly, then boisterous, then aggressive. His job is to catch the transition before it becomes a problem. The club behind the bar isn't decorative. A group in the corner starts singing along with the minstrel, though their singing is less music and more enthusiastic noise. The song is a drinking song with lyrics about ale, women, and the general unfairness of life. Everyone knows the chorus, and everyone butchers it with equal enthusiasm. Margery continues working through the entertainment, serving food and drink, collecting payment, and navigating the room with the skill of someone who's dodged grabbing hands and spilled drinks for years. She ignores the minstrel's attempt to flirt with her. She's heard better lines from better men, and she's not interested in any of them. The food for evening customers is simpler than lunch. Bread and cheese, leftover pie. Whatever pottage remains from the day, now even thicker and less appetizing. People eat because they're hungry, or because eating gives them something to do with their hands while they drink. As darkness falls completely, the inn becomes an island of light in a dark world. Outside, there are no streetlights, no illuminated signs, just darkness that feels absolute and vaguely threatening. Inside, the fire and candles create a warm glow that makes the space feel almost cozy if you ignore the smell and the crowd. More locals arrive after finishing their work, the blacksmith still covered in soot, the miller dusted with flour, the tanner who everyone wishes would sit downwind because his profession comes with a permanent odour. They all order ale and find seats among friends or acquaintances. Conversations fragment into smaller groups. Over here, farmers discussing crop rotation and soil quality with the intensity of people whose lives depend on getting it right. Over there, craftsmen arguing about techniques and materials. In the corner, younger men boasting about strength, skill, and romantic conquests that probably didn't happen. The minstrel switches to faster, livelier tunes. Some people start clapping along. A few brave or drunk souls attempt dancing, which in a crowded room with an uneven floor is asking for injuries. Someone steps on someone else's foot. Apologies are offered and accepted, because everyone's too tired to fight about it. William refills cups, collects coins, and maintains order through presence rather than action. He's a large man who moves with purpose, and that's usually enough. Occasionally he tells someone they've had enough, which is received with varying degrees of grace. Margery finally sits, down for a moment, rare and brief. She's been on her feet since before dawn, cooking, serving, cleaning, managing. The exhaustion shows in her face, but she'll rest for maybe 10 minutes before something needs her attention again. The evening at the inn isn't glamorous or refined. It's noisy, crowded, and smells like a combination of ale, smoke, and too many people in insufficient space. But it's also communal, warm, and alive in a way that the cold, dark world outside is not. This is why people come. Not for luxury, but for connection. For a brief escape from isolation and hardship. For the reminder that they're not alone in their struggles. And for ale. Definitely for the ale. As night deepens, the character of the inn shifts once more. The minstrel has finished performing and is eating his earned meal in the corner. The crowd has thinned somewhat as people with families and responsibilities head home. But a core group remains, and new arrivals appear. The can't see obstacles until you're falling, can't see obstacles until you're falling into them, but sometimes circumstances demand it. Messengers with urgent news, merchants who got delayed, people fleeing something or running towards something. They arrive at the inn looking worse for wear. Horses are exhausted, riders are nervous. Everyone has stories about strange sounds in the dark or suspicious movements in the shadows. Maybe they saw something. Maybe it was just paranoia. Either way, they're relieved to be somewhere with walls and light. William gets them situated. Horses to the stable, where the stable hand is awakened to care for them. Ale to warm them. Questions about sleeping arrangements. How many rooms are available? Who's willing to share? What's the pricing for different levels of comfort? The overnight sleeping options at a medieval inn form a clear hierarchy. At the top, private rooms for nobles or very wealthy merchants. These are still shared with maybe one or two other people, but at least they're strangers of similar social status. The beds have actual mattresses, not great ones, but stuffed with straw and somewhat maintained. Next level down, shared rooms with multiple beds. You might share your bed with 3 strangers, their belongings piled around them, everyone trying to claim enough space to sleep without touching too much. The mattresses here are thinner, lumpier, and home to more wildlife. Bottom tier, sleeping in the main room on the floor or on benches. You use your pack as a pillow, your cloak as a blanket, and hope nobody robs you while you sleep. This costs the least, offers the least comfort, and is where most people end up. Pricing varies. A spot in a shared upstairs room might cost 4 pence. A private room could be 8 pence or more. Sleeping on the floor might be 1 or 2 pence. Everything is negotiable based on season, demand, and William's assessment of what he can charge. The new arrivals negotiate their accommodations while drinking ale to warm up from the road. They're cold, tired, and suspicious of everyone, which is the standard traveller attitude. They want safety, warmth, and rest, in that order. Meanwhile, the established evening crowd continues, their drinking and conversation. The noise level has dropped as exhaustion sets in, but the dedication to ale consumption remains strong. These are men, mostly men, who have few other forms of recreation and relaxation. A dispute breaks out near the fire about local politics. Something about the Lord's new tax assessor being unreasonable. Voices rise, fingers point. William moves closer, and his proximity alone causes the argument to de-escalate. Nobody wants to be thrown out into the dark. The fire is fed more logs as the temperature drops. Outside, the world is cold and hostile. Inside, the fire creates a bubble of warmth that doesn't quite reach the corners or the upstairs rooms, but it's better than nothing. Margery makes her final rounds of the evening, checking that paying customers have what they need, that no fights are brewing, that the fire is maintained but not dangerous. She's tired in a bone-deep way that comes from 16-hour workdays, 7 days a week, for years, on end. The overnight guests begin to retire. They climb the creaking stairs to their assigned rooms, carrying candles that cast jumping shadows on the walls. The upstairs fills with the sounds of people settling in, boots being removed, conversations in low voices, someone coughing, always coughing. Downstairs, the diehards remain, the men who don't want to go home to cold houses and colder wives. The travellers too nervous to sleep yet. The regulars who have been part of the inn's furniture for so long they might as well be paying rent. William begins the slow process of closing down. Not shutting the inn, that won't happen until much later, but transitioning from active service to minimal supervision. He banks the fire so it will burn through the night without constant attention. He moves the remaining ale to a locked storage area. He counts the day's earnings, a mix of coins that represent survival or ruin depending on the total. The money goes into a locked box that's hidden, in the private family quarters upstairs. Robbery is a constant threat, and innkeepers are known to have cash on hand. William has been robbed twice in his career, once violently, and he's taken precautions. The box is hidden, heavy, and would require knowing exactly where to look. As midnight approaches, the last dedicated drinkers finally call it a night. They stumble toward the door, the upstairs rooms, or the floor, depending on their plans and finances. Their departure leaves the main room quiet except for the crackling fire and the sounds of a building settling. William does a final check. The door is barred from inside, not locked but secured against casual entry. The fire is safe. The sleeping guests aren't dead or dying. Everything is as it should be. He climbs the stairs to his own quarters, where Margery is already asleep, despite the noise from the rooms around them. She's mastered the skill of sleeping through anything, which is essential when you live above an inn. William lies down on their bed, which is better than anything offered to guests, but still just a straw mattress on a wooden frame. His body aches from a day of lifting barrels, breaking up fights, and managing chaos. Tomorrow will be exactly the same, and the day after that, and the day after that. This is the rhythm of the medieval inn. Endless work punctuated by brief rest, only to begin again before dawn. Outside, the village is dark and silent. Inside, the inn breathes with the collective respiration of sleeping strangers. The day is over, but only until Margery starts banging pots in about 4 hours. While the inn sleeps, or attempts to, the night hours reveal the less glamorous realities of medieval hospitality. This is when you discover that your romantic notions about cosy inns were lies invented by people who never actually stayed in one. Let's start with the upstairs rooms. You've paid your 4 pence for a spot in a shared bed, and you've climbed the creaking stairs by candlelight. Your roommates are 2 merchants and a pilgrim, all strangers, all exhausted, all about to make your night memorable for terrible reasons. The bed itself is a wooden frame supporting a mattress stuffed with straw. The straw is old, compressed in some places and lumpy in others, creating a topography that makes comfortable sleeping positions theoretical rather than actual. The mattress is covered with a rough linen sheet that might have been white once but is now an indeterminate beige colour. 4 grown men are expected to share this bed. The bed is maybe 5 feet wide. You do the math. Everyone tries to claim space through a combination of strategic positioning and aggressive sprawling. You're wedged against someone who smells like the road, which is a combination of horse, sweat, and regret. On your other side is someone who's already snoring with the volume of a saw cutting through wood. The blanket is a thin wool affair that provides minimal warmth and has to be shared among 4 people. This leads to a subtle war of tugging throughout the night. Someone pulls the blanket toward themselves. Someone else pulls it back. You wake up cold because the blanket is now entirely covering the pilgrim, who sleeps like the dead. Speaking of the dead, that's what you wish you were around 2 in the morning when the bedbugs find you. Bedbugs are a fact of life in medieval inns. Every inn has them. Every bed hosts them. They live in the straw, in the wooden frame, in the cracks and crevices of the building itself. When warm bodies lie down, the bugs emerge to feed. The bites start small, barely noticeable in your exhaustion. Then the itching begins. You scratch. The person next to you scratches. Soon everyone's scratching, half asleep and irritated. This is normal. This is expected. This is why experienced travellers wear long undergarments to bed, not for warmth, but for a minimal barrier against insects. The room itself offers no comfort. It's cold because heating upstairs rooms would require fireplaces in each room, which is an expense and fire hazard no one wants. Your breath is visible in the air. The single small window is shuttered against the cold, but also against any fresh air, so the room smells like enclosed humans and whatever they brought with them. Noise is another issue. The building is timber construction with thin walls. You can hear everything from the adjacent rooms. Someone snoring, a couple arguing in whispers, someone else dealing with digestive consequences of medieval food. The sounds blend into a symphony of discomfort. One of your bedmates gets up to use the chamber pot in the corner. Medieval chamber pots are ceramic vessels that serve as indoor toilets. They're not emptied until morning. The sound of someone using it in the dark is not subtle, and the smell adds a new dimension to the room's already complex aromatic profile. Someone else has clearly had too much ale and is now dealing with it. They stumble across the room, bump into furniture, curse quietly, and eventually find what they're looking for. The chamber pot is getting quite a workout tonight. You try to find a comfortable position. This is impossible. The straw mattress has compressed into a shape that accommodates no human spine. Your hip is pressed against something hard, maybe a wooden slat, maybe someone's concealed money pouch. You shift, which disturbs the person next to you, who shifts, creating a cascade of movement and grumbling. Around 3 a.m, you finally drift into something resembling sleep. This lasts approximately 45 minutes before the snoring person next to you reaches a volume that should not be possible from human anatomy. You consider smothering them with the blanket, but decide that's probably frowned upon. Downstairs, the main room presents its own challenges for those sleeping there. The floor is hard-packed earth, it's cold, it's uneven, and you're sharing space with people you don't know and shouldn't trust. Smart travellers sleep with their valuables inside their clothing or under their bodies. Less smart travellers wake up to find their belongings have been lightened. Theft in medieval inns is common enough that it's considered an occupational hazard of travelling. The fire in the main room has burned down to embers, providing minimal warmth. Those closest to the fireplace are relatively comfortable. Those near the walls are freezing. There's a clear hierarchy of sleeping positions based on when you arrived and how intimidating you look. Someone in the corner is having a nightmare, muttering and thrashing. Someone else is dealing with illness, making periodic trips outside to the privy or just stepping into the cold air to vomit discreetly. Medieval food does this to people. A rat skitters across the room, bold in the darkness. Rats are as much residents of the inn as the humans, maybe more so since they don't pay. They're searching for dropped food, spilled ale, anything edible. One runs across a sleeping person's leg. The person kicks reflexively. The rat escapes. This is a nightly routine. The inn's cat, a scraggly creature that lives here specifically to hunt rats, is somewhere in the darkness doing its job. You hear a brief scuffle, a squeak that ends abruptly and then silence. The cat is earning its keep. As dawn approaches, maybe 4 or 5 in the morning, the quality of sleep deteriorates further. People start waking, coughing, scratching, preparing mentally for another day. No one wakes refreshed. That's not what medieval sleep accomplishes. You wake up tired but vertical, which is the best you can hope for. The chamber pots upstairs are now quite full and quite fragrant. They'll be emptied first thing in the morning, carried downstairs and dumped in the privy or the street, depending on the innkeeper's standards and local regulations. This is what a night at a medieval inn actually entails. Not romantic rest by candlelight, not peaceful slumber in quaint surroundings, but rather a grinding test of endurance involving insects, strangers, cold, noise, and the growing realization that you're paying money for this experience. When Margery starts banging pots at 4:30, announcing the start of a new day, most guests are already awake. They're tired, itchy, cold, and ready to leave. But first, they have to face medieval breakfast again. Welcome to your second day at the inn. It's exactly like the first, except now you're more tired and have more bug bites. Dawn breaks over the inn and the cycle begins again. Margery's pot banging echoes through the building. Guests groan, rise and begin the process of gathering their belongings and preparing to leave. But before anyone departs, there's the matter of settling accounts. William positions himself near the door because no one leaves until they've paid. Medieval hospitality operates on a strictly cash basis. The concept of checking out and settling a bill is a negotiation that sometimes gets contentious. That'll be 8 pence for the room, 4 for meals and drink, and 2 for the stable, William announces to a merchant who's already mentally calculating ways to dispute the charges. 8 pence? You said 6 last night, the merchant protests. 6 was for the bed. 2 more is for the, extra services. William's face is impassive. The extra services are mostly fictional, but disputing with William is like arguing with weather. You can do it, but it won't change anything. The merchant pays, grumbling about highway robbery, which is ironic since he'll probably encounter actual highway robbery before reaching his destination. He's getting his money's worth just in not being stabbed. Other guests settle their accounts with varying levels of grace. The pilgrim pays exactly what was agreed, adding a small blessing that William accepts with a nod. The labourers pool their whole coins, counting carefully because every penny matters when you're living day to day. One guest tries to slip out without paying. William catches him at the door with a hand on his shoulder that's friendly in appearance but firm enough to prevent movement. Forget something? The guest suddenly remembers his outstanding bill and pays up quickly. The morning departure is staggered. Those with long journeys leave early to maximise daylight travelling hours. Those with local business take their time. Everyone stops at the privy before leaving, because the next public facility might be miles away. The stable is busy with the stable hand bringing out horses, checking their hooves and accepting tips from generous travellers or curses from cheap ones. The animals look about as enthusiastic about travelling as their owners, which is to say, not very. As guests depart, they exchange the standard medieval goodbyes. Safe travels. May God... They arrive at the inn looking worse for wear. Horses are exhausted. Riders are nervous. Everyone has stories about strange sounds in the dark or suspicious movements in the shadows. Maybe they saw something. Maybe it was just paranoia. Either way, they're relieved to be somewhere with walls and light. William gets them situated. Horses to the stable, where the stable hand is awakened to care for them. Ale to warm them. Questions about sleeping arrangements. How many rooms are available? Who's willing to share? What's the pricing for different levels of comfort? The overnight sleeping options at a medieval inn form a clear hierarchy. At the top, private rooms for nobles or very wealthy merchants. These are still shared with maybe 1 or 2 other people, but at least they're strangers of similar social status. The beds have actual mattresses, not great ones but stuffed with straw and somewhat maintained. Next level down, shared rooms with... The apprentice boy sweeps with resigned efficiency. This is his life now. Sweeping, hauling water, feeding the fire, and wondering if there's a better career path available. There isn't, but he wonders anyway. Margery starts preparing for the lunch crowd, which will arrive in a few hours, expecting food that's edible and ale that's cold. She's working with yesterday's leftover ingredients, plus whatever fresh supplies arrived this morning. The menu will be similar to yesterday because medieval cuisine operates on repetition rather than variety. William does inventory, checking what needs to be ordered, what's running low, what can be stretched another day or 2. Running an inn is an endless balancing act between having enough supplies and not overspending on inventory that might spoil. The financial reality of medieval innkeeping is brutal. Expenses include rent or property costs, supplies, wages for any help, bribes to local authorities to overlook various violations, and mysterious fees that appear whenever someone official wants extra money. Income comes from room charges, food and drink sales, and stable fees. During busy travel seasons, an inn can be profitable. During slow periods, it's a struggle to break even. William and Margery aren't getting rich. They're surviving, which in medieval terms is success. The local crowd begins filtering in for their morning ale. Yes, morning ale. Because starting your day with alcohol is standard when the water is poison. They take their usual spots, order their usual drinks, and begin their usual conversations. Thomas the carpenter is already here, nursing an ale and a hangover from last night. Agnes the egg seller stops by to warm up before heading to market. The cast of regulars reassembles like a play entering its second act. The inn's rhythm re-establishes itself. Conversation, drinking, the occasional meal, the constant background work of keeping the place running. It's mundane in a way that medieval life often is, punctuated by brief moments of drama or danger. A messenger arrives with news from the capital. The king is planning another campaign, which means more taxes to fund it. Everyone groans because taxes are already brutal, and more taxes means less food and more suffering. But complaining doesn't change anything, so they complain anyway because it's therapeutic. Someone mentioned seeing smoke on the horizon yesterday. Could be a house fire, could be raiders, could be someone burning brush. The uncertainty is typical. Information travels slowly and unreliably, so rumours fill the gaps. The conversation turns to local matters. Who's marrying whom? Who owes money to whom? Who got caught poaching? And what punishment they received. Medieval villages are small enough that everyone knows everyone's business, and they discuss it with the enthusiasm of people who have limited entertainment options. Margery serves lunch to a smaller crowd than yesterday. Travel is unpredictable, and some days are busier than others. She's hoping for a decent evening crowd to make up the difference. The afternoon unfolds with familiar patterns. Drinking, talking, the slow rotation of customers as some leave and others arrive. The fire needs feeding, the ale needs replenishing. Life continues its grinding forward momentum. This is the reality of the medieval inn. Not adventure and romance, but repetition and survival. The same tasks, the same customers, the same struggles day after day after day. William and Margery know every crack in the walls, every loose board in the floor, every customer's drinking limit and payment reliability. The inn is their life, their income, their prison, and their kingdom. As evening approaches again, the cycle continues. New travellers will arrive, food will be served, ale will flow, entertainment might appear or might not, and eventually everyone will try to sleep in uncomfortable conditions before doing it all again tomorrow. This is the medieval inn. This is the life of those who run it. This is why romanticising the past is for people who never actually lived there. Welcome to day 2. It's exactly like day 1, and day 3 will be the same, and the day after that, forever. Let's talk about what happens when things go wrong at a medieval inn, because they frequently do. The inn is a pressure cooker of stressed travellers, questionable ale, and people carrying weapons. It's not if something goes wrong, it's when and how bad. Fights are the most common problem. They start over anything. Someone looked at someone wrong. Someone took someone's seat. Someone made a comment about someone's wife, region, profession, or mother. Medieval people are touchy, armed and drunk, which is a dangerous combination. William has developed a sixth sense for brewing violence. He sees the signs, voices getting louder, postures becoming aggressive, hands moving toward belts where knives are kept. His job is to intervene before weapons are drawn, because once weapons appear, the situation escalates fast. Tonight, 2 merchants are arguing about trade routes. It's stupid, it's petty, it's about to become violent. William moves in with the confidence of someone who's done this 100 times. Gentlemen, save it for outside if you must, but not in here. His tone is neutral, but his presence is not. He's larger than both of them, and holding a wooden cudgel that's seen use before. One merchant backs down immediately. Smart man. The other one is drunk enough to consider pushing his luck. He looks at William, at the cudgel, at the door, and makes a calculation. He backs down too. Crisis averted. But not all situations diffuse so easily. Last month, 2 travellers got into a knife fight over a gambling dispute. One ended up with a serious wound. The other ended up running for his life because the injured man's friends wanted revenge. William had to physically throw someone out the door while Margery tried to stop the bleeding with rags and hope. The injured man survived, barely. He left as soon as he could walk because staying meant more trouble. The inn's reputation took a hit. Violence is expected, but too much violence drives away customers. Theft is another constant problem. Despite William's vigilance, guests get robbed. Someone's pack goes missing. A merchant loses a portion of his goods. A traveller wakes up to find their money gone. Most victims suspect their roommates, and they're usually right. There's little William can do. He's not the law. He's not the constable. He runs an inn, and his authority extends only as far as his property and his willingness to enforce it. If someone gets robbed and the thief has already left town, that's unfortunate, but not his problem. Sometimes the guests themselves are the problem. Drunk travellers who won't stop causing trouble. Belligerent locals who've been cut off but keep demanding more ale. People who can't or won't pay. Their bills. William has strategies for each. The drunk gets escorted out, firmly but not violently unless necessary. The belligerent local gets banned, at least until next week when they'll sheepishly return and behave better. The non-payer gets a simple choice. Pay up or explain your situation to the local authorities, who are less sympathetic than William. Then there are the diseases. In a space where dozens of strangers share beds, air and facilities, illness spreads like rumour. Someone arrives with a cough. 3 days later, half the guests are coughing. Fever, stomach ailments, rashes, and unidentifiable maladies circulate constantly. Margery tries to maintain basic cleanliness, but medieval understanding of disease is based more on superstition than science. Bad air causes illness. Imbalanced humours cause illness. God's punishment causes illness. The actual vectors, contaminated water, unwashed hands, shared eating utensils, go unrecognised. When someone gets seriously ill, at the inn, it's a crisis. Do you keep them? Do you send them away? Keeping them risks infecting other guests and hurting business. Sending them away might mean sending them to die on the road. It's a choice with no good options. William typically makes the practical decision. If they can pay, they can stay until they recover or die. If they can't pay, they need to leave. It sounds harsh because it is harsh, but running an inn isn't charity. It's business, and sentiment doesn't pay the rent. Fire is the nightmare scenario. Medieval buildings are wooden, dry, and filled with open flames from cooking fires, candles and lamps. One accident, one unattended candle, one spark from the fireplace, and the entire structure can burn. Every innkeeper has heard stories of inns burning down, taking everything with them. Livelihoods destroyed in minutes. Sometimes people die, trapped upstairs or overcome by smoke. William checks the fire constantly, almost obsessively, because the alternative is unthinkable. They've had close calls. A candle tipped over once, catching some rushes on the floor. Margery stomped it out before it spread. A spark from the fireplace landed on a wooden bench, smouldering until someone noticed. Each incident is a reminder of how quickly disaster can strike. Then there are the legal problems. The inn operates under various regulations, some official and some invented by local authorities looking for bribes. There are rules about who can serve ale, what can be charged, how travellers should be treated, and dozens of other things that change based on who's enforcing them. William pays what he has to pay, a few coins to the ale taster who inspects the quality and quantity, a small fee to the constable who overlooks minor violations, a donation to the local church to maintain good relations. It's all part of the cost of doing business. But sometimes authorities decide to make an example. An inn gets raided for serving watered ale or overcharging travellers. Fines are levied, goods are confiscated. The innkeeper might spend time in the local stocks, publicly humiliated as punishment and warning. William has been in the stocks once early in his career for a violation he still claims was unjust. He sat there for 6 hours while people threw things and made comments. It was humiliating and effective. He's been more careful about who he bribes and how much since then. The reality is that running a medieval inn is navigating constant threats. Physical violence, theft, disease, fire, legal trouble, and financial ruin are all possibilities on any given day. Success is measured not by profit, but by survival. Most inns fail. They burn down, go bankrupt, or get shut down by authorities. The few that succeed do so through a combination of luck, skill, and ruthless practicality. William and Margery have been running the Green Dragon for 7 years. That's long enough to be established, but not long enough to feel secure. Every day is a new opportunity for disaster. Tonight, the disaster is minor. A guest is sick, vomiting in the corner. Margery cleans it up with practiced efficiency. Tomorrow, who knows? But they'll face it, because that's what you do. The medieval inn isn't romantic. It's a battlefield where the enemies are entropy, human nature, and bad luck, and the only victory is making it to tomorrow. Beyond the daily struggles of running the inn, there's a parallel reality that unfolds in the shadows. The medieval inn isn't just a legitimate business, it's also a hub for activities that exist in the grey areas between legal and criminal. Let's start with the obvious one, prostitution. Medieval society officially condemns it, while practically accepting it as inevitable. Inns are where supply meets demand, and innkeepers occupy an uncomfortable position of knowing what's happening while pretending they don't. William doesn't run a brothel, that's important to him, but he also doesn't ask too many questions when certain women arrive in the evening and depart in the morning, with obviously more coin than they arrived with. Some innkeepers actively facilitate these arrangements, taking a cut of the earnings. William's approach is strategic ignorance. The church condemns it. The authorities prosecute it selectively, usually when someone needs to be made an example or when bribes aren't forthcoming. But the reality is that inns provide one of the few semi-private spaces for these transactions, and everyone involved knows this. Margery has strong opinions about it, which she shares with William in private, but she also recognises that some of these women are desperate, widowed or abandoned, with few options for survival. Her judgment is tempered by understanding, even if she doesn't approve. Then there's the smuggling. Goods move through the inn that probably shouldn't. Merchants avoiding taxes by transporting items through back channels. Stolen property, being moved from one region to another. Contraband that's illegal to trade but profitable for those willing to take the risk. William's policy is simple. He doesn't ask what's in the packs, he doesn't inspect goods, and he doesn't report anything to authorities unless it directly threatens his inn. This willful blindness is standard among innkeepers, because prying into customer business is bad for repeat trade. Occasionally, he gets pulled aside by a merchant who asks if a package can be left at the inn for pickup by someone else. William allows this, for a small fee, as long as the package isn't obviously stolen goods, or something that will bring authorities to his door. The inn becomes a drop point, neutral territory where transactions can occur without direct meetings. The gambling is more open, but no less problematic. Dice games, card games, and wagering on various contests happen in the inn's corners every night. Gambling is technically illegal without a license, but enforcement is sporadic and dependent on whether anyone in authority cares on that particular day. William tolerates it because gamblers drink more and stay longer, but he also knows that gambling leads to disputes, which lead to accusations of cheating, which lead to violence. He keeps a close eye on any gaming, ready to intervene when money and pride create a dangerous combination. The inn also serves as an informal message centre. People leave word for others. Travellers bring news and are asked to carry messages onward. Some of these messages are innocent, family news or business updates. Others are more questionable, coded communications about deals, movements, or plans that wouldn't survive official scrutiny. William accepts messages with a nod, stores them behind the bar, and passes them along when the intended recipients arrive. He doesn't read them, doesn't discuss them, doesn't acknowledge their content. He's just a conduit, and that plausible deniability keeps him safe from most complications. There's also the matter of fugitives. People running from the law, from debts, from marriages, from obligations occasionally pass through the inn. They're identifiable by their nervousness, their reluctance to give names, their tendency to sit with backs to walls and eyes on the door. William's approach depends on the situation. If someone's running from a murder charge, he's not harbouring them, because that brings serious trouble. If someone's escaping a bad marriage or fleeing debt collectors, he's less concerned. The line between criminal and desperate is often blurry in medieval society. He had one memorable guest last year who turned out to be a disgraced monk fleeing his monastery after stealing from the church treasury. The man stayed one night, paid in silver that was probably part of the stolen funds, and disappeared before morning. William found out about the theft weeks later when authorities came asking questions. He claimed ignorance, which was partly true. He hadn't known about the theft at the time. The authorities suspected he was lying but couldn't prove it. They left with a warning that harbouring fugitives carries severe penalties. William took the warning seriously and became more careful about who he accepted. The black market for goods also operates through the inn. Merchants who've acquired items through questionable means need buyers. Buyers looking for goods without paying full market price need sellers. The inn facilitates these connections through subtle signals and quiet conversations. William doesn't actively participate, but his inn provides the venue. A merchant might mention he has quality wool at below market prices, no questions asked. A buyer might express interest. They negotiate in low voices over ale. Money changes hands. The transaction is complete, and William has officially seen nothing. This ecosystem of semi-legal and illegal activity exists because medieval society creates it through its rigid structures, heavy taxation, and limited legal channels for trade and movement. The inn becomes a pressure valve, allowing things to happen that couldn't happen in more supervised settings. But it's dangerous. Every illegal transaction is a risk. Every fugitive harboured is potential trouble. Every blind eye turned is a gamble that the authorities won't decide to make an example. William walks this line carefully. He needs the business from these grey area activities because legitimate trade alone doesn't always cover expenses. But he can't be too obvious or too accommodating, or he'll attract attention from authorities or criminals who might see the inn as a target. The result is a constant balancing act, accepting some questionable activity while drawing lines at others, knowing enough to manage risk, but not so much that he becomes complicit, maintaining relationships with both legitimate merchants and shadier operators without fully committing to either. Margery knows all of this, of course. She sees the women, the packages, the gambling, the nervous travellers. She and William have discussed where their lines are, what they'll tolerate and what they won't. They don't always agree, but they've found a working compromise. This is the hidden side of the medieval inn, the part that doesn't appear in romantic stories, the grey economy that operates in the spaces between official society. It's not glamorous, it's not heroic, it's just survival in a system that doesn't leave much room for honest people to thrive. And tomorrow, it will all happen again. Different faces, same dynamics. Because as long as there are laws, taxes and restrictions, there will be people finding ways around them, and Many of those ways lead through the inn's front door. As our day at the medieval inn draws to a close, let's talk about what this place really represents beyond the daily grind of serving ale and dodging disasters. The inn exists at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. Physically, it's located where travellers' paths intersect, but metaphorically, it sits at the junction between private and public, legal and illegal, local and foreign, medieval society in miniature. For travellers, the inn is temporary sanctuary, a brief pause in dangerous journeys through a hostile world. It's not home, but it's shelter. Not safe, but safer than the road. Not comfortable, but more comfortable than sleeping in a ditch. The bar is low, and the inn clears it, barely. For locals, the inn is communal space in a world where community is survival. Your home is cold, dark, and isolated. The inn is warm, lit, and social. Here, you're not alone with your thoughts and your fears. You're surrounded by others facing the same brutal existence, and there's comfort in shared misery. The inn is also an information hub in an age before mass communication. News travels through travellers. Rumours spread through conversations. Ideas move from town to town via people who've heard things from other people who heard things. The inn is where these threads of information gather, tangle, and redistribute. William and Margery are more than innkeepers. They're gatekeepers of information, mediators of disputes, providers of informal banking services, witnesses to contracts, and unofficial therapists listening to travellers' problems. Their roles extend far beyond serving food and renting beds. The social hierarchy of medieval England plays out in the inn's space. Nobles get the best seats and private rooms. Merchants get respect and decent service. Peasants get what's left and are grateful for it. Everyone knows their place, and the inn reinforces these structures well, occasionally allowing brief moments of equality. A nobleman and a peasant might drink the same ale, sit in the same room, hear the same minstrel. The circumstances are different. The nobleman pays more and gets better treatment, but they're sharing space in ways that wouldn't happen in more formal settings. The inn is a democratizer slightly. It's also a pressure valve for medieval society's tensions. People come to the inn to escape their lives, even if only for a few hours. The farmer fleeing a nagging wife, the merchant taking a break from dangerous roads, the craftsman avoiding creditors, the labourer too tired to face his cold, dark home. They drink, talk, laugh, fight, and briefly forget their circumstances. Then they go back to those same circumstances. Nothing changed but temporarily endured. The inn doesn't solve problems, it helps people survive them. But let's be honest about what surviving means. William and Margery work 16-hour days, 7 days a week, for the privilege of barely staying afloat financially. They face constant threats from violence, disease, fire, and legal trouble. Their retirement plan is working until they physically can't, then hoping their children will care for them. The guests aren't better off. They're travelling because they have to, not because they want to. They're merchants trying to make enough profit to survive another season. Labourers searching for work because their home region has none. Pilgrims hoping religious devotion will improve their miserable lives. Nobody in the medieval inn is there because their life is going well. They're there because it's necessary, because it's slightly better than the alternatives, because it's what survival looks like when you're living in 1348. The inn we've toured today is better than some and worse than others. William runs a relatively honest operation. Margery works hard to maintain minimal standards. The ale isn't watered too much. The food is questionable, but not poisonous. The thieves are discouraged, if not entirely prevented. Other inns are worse, much worse. Places where the ale is deliberately adulterated, where theft is tacitly encouraged, where violence is entertainment, and where the innkeeper's main skill is extracting maximum coin from minimum service. Some inns are just elaborate robbery operations with beds. The best inns are marginally better. Clean, maybe actually clean. Food that's been prepared with care. Ale that's properly brewed. Staff that treats guests with respect. But even the best medieval inn is still medieval, with all the limitations that implies. What would happen if you, a modern person with modern expectations, actually stayed at this inn for a night? You wouldn't last. Not because you're weak, but because you're unprepared for the reality. The smell alone would overwhelm you. Your body, accustomed to indoor plumbing, climate control and regular bathing, would revolt against the sensory assault. The food would make you ill because your digestive system hasn't built up tolerance to medieval bacteria. The sleeping arrangements would prevent actual rest. The constant noise, cold and discomfort would be unbearable, and that's assuming nothing goes wrong. No fights, no theft, no fire, no plague outbreak. Just a normal night at a normal medieval inn would be beyond your capacity to endure. The people who lived this life daily weren't tougher than you. They were adapted to conditions you're not. They didn't enjoy it more. They suffered through it because they had no choice and no frame of reference for anything better. William will die younger than you will, probably in his 50s if he's lucky. Margery's body is already breaking down from years of hard labour. The travellers staying tonight face constant danger on the roads. The locals drinking in the corner are malnourished, disease-ridden and exhausted. This is the medieval inn. Not romantic, not cosy, not the fantasy you've been sold by. Movies and books. It's a commercial enterprise operating on the edge of disaster, staffed by people grinding themselves to dust, serving customers who are one bad day away from catastrophe. The fire will burn low tonight. The guests will sleep poorly. Tomorrow, Margery will bang pots at 4:30, and the cycle will continue, day after day, year after year, until fire, plague, bankruptcy, or death ends it. This is the reality. This is what a day in the life of a medieval inn actually looks like, and you wouldn't last past breakfast. Before we close the door on the Green Dragon for the night, let's address one final aspect of medieval inn life that we've danced around: the sheer, grinding hopelessness that permeates everything. Modern survival is about planning for the future. Medieval survival is about making it through today. Tomorrow is a theoretical concept. Next week might not exist. Next year is fantasy. The inn operates on this same brutal immediacy. William doesn't think about retirement. He thinks about whether today's earnings cover today's expenses. Margery doesn't dream about vacation. She calculates whether the bread will last until the next delivery. The future is tomorrow's problems, and tomorrow's problems only matter if you survive today. This mindset affects everything. Why maintain the building beyond basic functionality? You might burn down next week. Why invest in improvements? You might lose everything to taxes or theft. Why plan ahead? The plague might kill everyone before your plans matter. The inn reflects this philosophy. It's maintained enough to function, but not enough to thrive. Repairs are made when things break, not before. Improvements happen only when absolutely necessary. The entire operation runs on minimum viable effort, because anything more is wasted energy. The guests carry the same attitude. Merchants don't plan business strategies. They react to immediate opportunities and threats. Travellers don't optimize routes. They take the path that seems safest today. Labourers don't build careers. They find work, do it, and hope there's more work tomorrow. This creates a society stuck in stasis. No one's building for the future because the future is too uncertain. Innovation is limited, because why risk resources on something new when the old way works well enough to survive? Progress is nearly impossible when everyone's focused on immediate survival. The inn is a microcosm of this stagnation. The same food every day, the same ale from the same brewer, The same customers having the same conversations about the same problems that never get solved. It's a loop, endlessly repeating, with no indication it will ever change. And the terrible part, they're right to think this way. The medieval world is genuinely that unstable. Plague could arrive tomorrow and kill half the town. War could break out and devastate the region. Famine could strike and make food unaffordable. Their pessimism is realism. William has seen 3 innkeepers before him fail at running the same building. One burned down with the previous structure. One went bankrupt. One was murdered in a robbery. He's the 4th attempt at making this location work, and he knows he probably won't be the last. This knowledge colours everything. Why be kind to guests when they're just passing through and won't remember you? Why maintain high standards when customers have no choice but to accept what you offer? Why care when caring changes nothing? But somehow, William does care. Not because it makes logical sense, but because the alternative is becoming completely hollowed out. He's fair with customers mostly. He maintains the inn adequately. He protects his family fiercely. These small acts of resistance against total nihilism are what keep him human. Margery cares too, in her own way. She cooks food that could be worse but isn't. She cleans spaces that will be dirty again tomorrow. She tends to sick. Travellers who will leave and never return. These are small mercies in a merciless world, and they matter more than they should. The inn's regulars, those locals who drink here daily, are also performing their own small rebellions against hopelessness. They gather because isolation is death. They talk because silence is surrender. They laugh because the alternative is crying, and crying doesn't help. This is what makes the medieval inn both depressing and strangely inspiring. It's people choosing to keep going despite every rational reason to give up. It's maintaining standards when standards don't matter. It's creating small pockets of warmth and community in a cold, hostile world. But let's not get too romantic about it. This isn't triumph of the human spirit. It's just survival instinct playing out. Most of these people aren't choosing to persevere. They're trapped by circumstance with no other options. William can't just decide to stop being an innkeeper. He has no other skills, no other opportunities, no savings to start over. He's locked into this life until it kills him. That's not inspirational. That's tragic. Margery can't escape either. As a woman in medieval society, her options are even more limited. She can work with her husband, work for someone else's husband, or try to survive alone, which is nearly impossible. She's chosen the least bad option, and she'll work it until her body gives out. The guests aren't adventurers seeking experiences. They're people forced by economic necessity or legal obligation to travel through dangerous territory, risking their lives and health for marginal gains. Most would prefer to stay home if they could afford to. Even the inn itself is trapped. It can't become something else. It can't close without devastating the family that depends on it. It can't significantly improve without resources that don't exist. It's locked into being barely adequate forever. This is the medieval condition. Not just poverty, but poverty without hope of improvement. Not just hardship, but hardship that will continue until death. Not just struggle, but struggle that leads nowhere, except to more struggle. The inn is a monument to this futility. Every day is the same. Every year is the same. Nothing changes. Nothing improves. Everyone just keeps performing their roles until they can't anymore. Then someone else steps in and performs the same roles the same way. And yet, people keep coming. The fire keeps burning. The ale keeps flowing. Life, if you can call it that, continues. Not because it's good, but because it's what there is. As night falls on the Green Dragon one final time in our visit, the scene is familiar. Fire crackling, guests drinking, conversations murmuring, the smell of humanity and smoke and survival. It could be yesterday. It could be tomorrow. It's always the same. William will bar the door tonight. Margery will count the earnings. The guests will try to sleep, and in a few hours it will all begin again. This is the medieval inn. This is the life it represents. This is why your romantic notions about the past are lies. You wouldn't last a day here, not because you're weak, but because you've been fortunate enough to never have to develop the kind of resigned endurance that medieval life demands. Be grateful for that, because this place, this life, this existence is no one's dream. It's everyone's nightmare made routine. The door closes, the fire burns low, the day ends. Tomorrow will be exactly the same, and that's the real horror of it all. Before we finally leave the Green Dragon behind, let's talk about what happened to places like this, because understanding the ending helps explain why we shouldn't romanticize the beginning. The inn we've spent this time exploring exists in 1348. Within a year, the Black Death will arrive in England, and everything will change. Not for the better, at least not at first. Plague doesn't discriminate. It kills innkeepers and guests alike. It empties villages and cities. It devastates the tight-knit communities that places like the Green Dragon serve. An inn requires customers, and plague removes customers permanently. William and Margery might survive the first wave. They might watch guests arrive sick and die upstairs. They might burn infected bedding and pray that the disease passes them by. Many innkeepers weren't so fortunate. The plague killed approximately 40 to 60% of England's population, and innkeepers, constantly exposed to travellers from affected areas, were especially vulnerable. If they survived, they'd face a transformed world. Labour shortages would drive up wages. Peasants would have bargaining power for the first time in generations. The rigid social structures would begin to crack. But transition is painful, and the decades following the plague were characterized by upheaval, rebellion, and conflict. The inn would continue if its keepers survived, but it would serve a changed clientele, fewer travellers on the roads, different economic relationships, new regulations as authorities tried to maintain control over a population that suddenly had options. Over the following centuries, inns would evolve. Slowly, painfully slowly, standards would improve. Private rooms would become more common. Food safety would improve slightly. The concept of hospitality as a service rather than a barely tolerated transaction would develop. But let's not pretend this was linear progress. For every improvement, there were setbacks. Wars disrupted trade routes. Religious conflicts destroyed communities. Economic crises ruined innkeepers who'd built successful businesses. The medieval inn's successor establishments in the early modern period were better. But better is relative when the baseline is sleeping in bug-infested straw. What would eventually replace the medieval inn was something we'd recognise as closer to a modern hotel. But that transformation took centuries. Real indoor plumbing wasn't common until the 19th century. Consistent food safety regulations came even later. The idea that hospitality workers deserve living wages is still being debated. The specific inn we've toured, the Green Dragon run by William and Margery, probably didn't survive to see these changes. Most medieval businesses lasted a generation at most. Fire, plague, bankruptcy, or simple bad luck ended them. The building might have been reused, rebuilt, or abandoned. The family probably scattered, their descendants finding other ways to survive. This is the trajectory of progress. Slow, uneven, built on the struggles of countless people who never saw the improvements they were working toward. William and Margery weren't pioneers of hospitality. They were survivors of a brutal system, doing what they could with what they had. And that's ultimately what the medieval inn represents. Not a charming way station for adventures, but a temporary shelter in a hostile world. Not a cosy gathering place, but a commercial necessity in a society where travel was dangerous and community was survival. The people who ran these places weren't romantic figures. They were working-class entrepreneurs grinding themselves to dust in hopes of maybe, possibly, achieving basic security. Most failed. Those who succeeded did so by being hard, suspicious, and willing to compromise their values for survival. The guests weren't adventurers. They were people forced by circumstance to risk their lives traveling through dangerous territory. They paid for minimal accommodations because they had no choice. They endured conditions that would horrify modern travelers because the alternative was sleeping outside and probably dying. This is what we've lost in our cultural memory of medieval inns. The reality has been replaced by fantasy. We remember the firelight and forget the smoke. We recall the communal drinking and ignore the violence it spawned. We romanticize the simplicity while overlooking the suffering. The modern hospitality industry, for all its flaws, is incomparably better than what medieval inns offered. You have legal recourse if you're mistreated. You have health standards protecting you from contaminated food. You have reasonable expectations of privacy, safety, and basic comfort. When you check into a modern hotel and complain about the Wi-Fi or the thread count, remember the green dragon, remember sharing a bed with 3 strangers and their parasites, remember chamber pots in corners and questionable stew for breakfast. Remember that the baseline for hospitality was once probably won't kill you. This isn't to say we shouldn't complain about modern problems. It's to provide perspective on how far we've come and how recently we've come that far. Your grandparents might have stayed in places that would horrify you. Your great-great-grandparents definitely did. The medieval inn is gone, and good riddance. What replaced it is far from perfect, but it's better in nearly every measurable way. We should acknowledge that improvement while recognizing that the improvement came at tremendous cost to the people who lived through the transition. William and Margery and countless other innkeepers like them lived hard lives in service to a vision they never saw realized. They made it through each day not knowing that their descendants would eventually inherit a world where hospitality meant comfort rather than mere survival. That's worth remembering. Not to romanticize their struggle, but to honor it honestly. They suffered so their children might suffer slightly less, who worked so their children might have it marginally better, in an endless chain leading eventually to a world where staying at an inn doesn't require courage. So the next time you're traveling and you check into your climate-controlled room with its private bathroom, clean linens, and reasonable expectation of not being robbed in your sleep, spare a thought for the medieval travellers who would have considered your accommodations literally unimaginable luxury, and be grateful you're not sharing a bed with 3 strangers, while bedbugs feast on you and someone empties a chamber pot 10 feet away. Progress isn't inevitable. It's built by countless people making small improvements over generations. The medieval inn reminds us where we started and how much work went into getting from there to here. The Green Dragon is closed now. The fire is out. The guests have departed. William and Margery have faded into history, remembered only as examples of lives that were hard, short, and lived without complaint, because complaining changed nothing. But their work mattered, their survival mattered, their small acts of maintaining standards in a world without standards mattered. This is the real lesson of the medieval inn. Not that the past was better, because it wasn't, but that people have always done their best with what they had, and sometimes that's enough to build towards something better, even if they never see it themselves. The door is locked. The day is done. The story is finished. You wouldn't have lasted past breakfast. But you also would never have had to try, because countless people like William and Margery built, slowly and painfully, a world where you don't have to. That's worth acknowledging. That's worth understanding. That's the truth behind the medieval inn. Not romance, not adventure, just survival, day after day, until it becomes something more. The end.